The PowerPoint. We've got. You would be familiar with this. This is the large volume of the Red Book, the folio edition, and then there's the Reader's Edition. And the Reader's Edition contains just the text, not the paintings. But I really recommend, if you can get the Reader's Edition along with the big one, to have it, because it's something that you can easily mark up and underline and make it your own. I'm a little hesitant to start marking all over the big volume as a manuscript, but that's not to say that you couldn't do that if you'd like. Um, let's see. This is where we're going tonight. These are a few of the paintings that are in the Liber Primus. You would recognize these from even from your reading of Memories, Dreams, Reflections, the top image of Jung's first deep dive, his first real serious exploration of active imagination. And we will be looking at that tonight in more detail. And on the lower right, you'll see the dream of Jung's, where he and his companion are shooting and killing Siegfried, the Germanic culture hero. And then on the lower right, you'll see Jung as he encounters Salome and Elijah. We'll see if we get that far tonight. This is a big work. In a general way, or kind of an overview of the general description of the Red Book, we could say that the Red Book is Jung's self-experimentation in connecting with the mythological layer of the unconscious. It's a self-experiment. He explored his own unconscious as deeply as he could. And the aim was to connect with the mythological layer of the unconscious, which he had been writing about and teaching about and exploring with clients. But this was his deep dive into the unconscious. And we'll look a little bit more, in the book to see how he in fact did that. This is the source of his later writing and his later work. And here's a quotation from him in 1957 from Jung. He says that the years of which I have spoken to you, when I pursued the inner images, were the most important time of my life. Everything else is to be derived from this. It began at that time, and the later details hardly matter anymore. My entire life consisted in elaborating what had burst forth from the unconscious and flooded me like an enigmatic stream and threatened to break me. That was the stuff and material for more than only one life. Everything later was merely the outer classification, the scientific elaboration, and the integration into life. But the numinous beginning, which contained everything, was then. I love his statement because he describes the numinous beginning here, the importance of it, but he also describes even the steps that he took. If you pay attention to what he writes here, he says that everything later was merely the outer classification. Okay, you can think about after he had this experience, how he looked for motifs, how he began the outer classification of typology, of concepts like the persona and the anima, the animus, the shadow, the classification, the scientific elaboration. There read psychological elaboration, because he's looking at the psychological meaning of this experience. It's not enough to have a numinous experience, but there is a deepening of it through the reflection and finding that meaning, and then finally the integration into life. So he actually gives us in this little intro the steps involved with the material. So the Red Book would be, on the one level, a pioneering psychological exploration and a description of the individuation process on one level. So you can read it as a psychological text, but you can also read it as a profound religious document depicting the journey of the soul and the birth of the new God image. Now, Jung wouldn't really see these things as separate. They're the same thing. that the individuation journey and process has to be pursued with a religious attitude. But the Red Book is a psychological exploration as well as a profound religious document. And so when we read this material, we have to have and I'm sure that you do, a sense of inquiry and curiosity in terms of the psychology or the psychological side, but also a sense of awe even of this as a kind of sacred text. The Red Book is divided into 3 sections. Now, Jung refers to the Red Book, of course, as the Liber Novus, or the New Book, and that title itself is evocative. But there are 3 books. The first is the Liber Primus, which is what we'll look at tonight. This is looking at Jung's initial descent and engagement with the unconscious through active imagination. So the active imagination piece is the important aspect that we'll be looking at. The continuation of the Liber Primus is the Liber Secundus. It follows right after in his journals. And here we'll see the dialogues and transformation through contact with figures of the collective unconscious. And then finally, some of you, I'm sure, have read into the Liber Secundus, so you would know his dialogues with the Red One or the Anchorite or Isdubar and on and on. The final section is called the Scrutinies, and this was picked up by Jung in 1917, the writing of the Scrutinies, and this is a reflection on primarily Philemon's commentary on the 7 Sermons of the Dead. So this is that conversation and dialogue and with the wise old man, so to speak, this Gnostic figure of Philemon, which is quite extraordinary. What's interesting also about these partitions is that the Liber Primus corresponds very, very closely to what is in alchemy considered the Negredo. This is really the Negredo period, almost to a T when you take a look at alchemical picture series, for example. So the Liber Primus, which we're looking at tonight, is going to be the Negredo. Liber Secundus corresponds in a fairly close way with what is the albedo stage, where you're engaging the archetypal level of the unconscious and allowing in that dialogue for the transformation. And the Scrutinies, I'm not sure, I'm not as familiar with the Scrutinies yet, so I'm not going to say so much about Scrutinies. That's ahead for us. Now, just on a practical level, I want to give you a little bit of some practical details that will help you in the reading. It's really, really important to know that the Liber Novus is composed in layers. If you know that, the reading of it makes it becomes very, very much more meaningful. The original material for the Red Book was to be found in Jung's original journals, which are referred to as the Black Books. And we now have the printed and published versions of the Black Books translated into English, thank goodness. And so the Black Books form Jung's original active imagination, his dreams, and his initial reflections that were then later brought into a larger draft, which then eventually was transcribed into what became the Red Book. So looking first at the Black Book, here's an image, a picture of what this is, and let me give you a close-up of this. I want to give you an idea of what's in the Black Books. I don't know if anybody has the Black Books, but this is really this is extraordinary. This is an entry in the Black Books, and of course this is Jung's own handwriting, and he's recording his dreams. And if you look carefully up here, you can see how he dated the dreams. His notation says 18, and then a Roman numeral 12, and then a 13. So essentially the date here is December the 18th, 1913. This particular entry is the dream where Jung and his companion murder Siegfried. Okay, it's quite an amazing dream. You can see the word dream here in German, Traum. In the Red Book, he calls it a vision, but it came to him in a dream, as he records it in the Black Book. In the Black Book, he records it just like you and I would. He records the dream. He comes back and adds in little penciled in remarks. He underlines things as he's recording the dream. Again, more entries in pencil. You can just feel, that his hand as he's composing this. And like you and I, he would underline things that were extremely important to him, like he does here. Now, when we look at the text for this, pay attention to this underlining and how that it's near the end of the page, because when we go to the text, which is at the back of the book, here's the text of what we just were looking at. And you can see here's that underlined statement. Here's the last little bit on the page, and then here's the page break where we go into the following page. I'd like to read this original version of the dream, and then we'll look at what it looks like in the Red Book, just to get a feeling of how he worked the material from the original material of the Black Book and carried it into the Red Book. So again, this is that dream where he's with his companion, and they've heard the horn of Siegfried, right? It's blowing and they're ready. So Jung writes in his journal that we fired at the same time and wounded him, that would be Siegfried, fatally. My companion left me in order to attend to the hero one last time, that is, to finish him off. And thereupon I turned to flee. A terrible rain swept down. I bounded up nimbly an incredibly steep path and later helped my wife, who followed me at a slower pace, to ascend. Some people mocked us, but I didn't care, since this showed that they didn't know that I had murdered the hero. But after this dream, I went through a mental torment unto death, and I felt that I must kill myself if I could not solve the riddle. I knew that I must shoot myself if I could not understand the dream. How incredible is that, right? It was so intense for him. The next line, gradually it dawned on me that the highest truth is one and the same with the absurd. At this moment, the enormous tension was released, and like rain, it swept away everything that was tensed, too highly strung. And soon sleep returned and brought with it a curiously beautiful image. So now there's a second dream that he has. Forms walked clad in white silk in colored atmosphere, each surrounded by a strangely fragrant, glowingly tinted aura, some reddish, the other bluish and greenish. Okay, now this is the original. Now this is how it ends up in the Red Book. He's going to take this excerpt and he's going to take it and rework it slightly. He doesn't, he omits things rather than edits it too much or edits it too much, very much. But here we have his version in the Red Book. The same situation or same dream. We fired at the same time and he fell slain. And thereupon I turned to flee, and a terrible rain swept down. But after this I went through a torment unto death, and I felt certain that I must kill myself if I could not solve the riddle of the murder of the hero. And then the spirit of the depths came to me and spoke these words. Notice in the other, it's not, he says here, gradually it dawned on me, and then he underlines it because it's so important to him. And here he says, it's the spirit of the depths that came to him and spoke. So he's writing this now in mythological language and giving it the gravitas, so to speak. So the spirit of the depths came to me and spoke these words. The highest truth is one and the same with the absurd. This statement saved me, and like rain after a long hot spell, it swept away everything in me that was too highly tensed. And then I had a second vision. He's calling it a vision here rather than the dream. I saw a merry garden in which forms walked clad in white silk, all covered in colored light, some reddish, the other bluish and greenish. Okay, now you see in parentheses this image, and it refers to the picture, the painting that is on that particular page. That's page 4 on the reverse side, the back side of it. Now, what else I want to point out, well, again, you can get a sense of how he has taken this original material, and he's not just editing and shortening it, but he's getting to the essence of it. And we can think about that when we're working on our dream material, for example. How do we get down to the essence of what the dream is saying? And in one sense, it feels shortened or edited, but he's also trying to express the essence, and he's also trying to give it the bring in that mythological aspect. The spirit of the depths came to me. I mean, we've all had the experience, right, of something dawning on us that seems really, really important. But how often do we really kind of have that sense that it's coming from the depths, and even the spirit of the depths? I mean, I find that to be incredible. Now, when you're reading the text, you've all probably come across this. When you're reading the text from the Red Book, you'll come across these little number 2s. Whenever you see the little number 2, what Jung is doing is he's switching from Black Book material. This is the Black Book material. He's switching from Black Book material, the original experience, and now he's going into a kind of a reflection and elaboration, a psychological reflection on what he has just entered from the Black Book. So if you know that, when you come to the 2, you can kind of shift gears a little bit, because this is like, you know, the difference between maybe reading the scripture and then theological reflection, or maybe the psychic experience and the psychological reflection. For Jung, this would all be the expression of the kind of the religious language of the psyche. So again, this is that little number 2 looks like. All right. One other little practical thing is finding your place in the reading. Because I've had a number of people ask me about this. Well, what does this mean and what does that mean? Here is the opening page of the Liber Primus. And you can see that at the top of this page, there's a little folio 1 written at the top of the page. And this is the method used in medieval manuscripts of numbering the pages. This is a folio. It has a front side and a back side. Both sides are considered part of folio 1. So this is folio 1, as it says here, and the R stands in Latin for the word recto, which means the straightforward, the direct, what's in front of you. So when you open the book, this is the page that you see, and when you flip it over, this is the back side of this page. It's considered the same folio. So again, you probably know this, but I wanted just to make sure that you can follow. So you see at the bottom here, this says folio 1, and then it has the V, which stands for verso, or you can think of the reverse side because it means a kind of a turning over. And then you'll also see an HI. The HI stands for historiated initial. And so in the reading, when you come to this, then you know that you've come up to one of these initials that he has elaborately painted in this medieval style. So this is a historiated initial. This would be one of those. This would be one of those. And then you can see, again, now we're going to folio 2, and this is going to be the recto side, the direct side, folio 2. And I've also put a couple of yellow marks in here. I had to do some translating of this German, but the Black Book material, it actually doesn't start here. It starts here and runs down to here. And then from here, he's doing his commentary and elaboration, and he's coming to the next chapter. The beginning of almost every chapter is straight from the Black Book. So you know when you get to a new chapter, you're back into Black Book material, and then in the reading, you're going to come to a number 2. The number 2 would sit right here in your text, and then you'd read his commentary all the way down to the next chapter, and you can see the chapters are clearly marked, chapter 1 and chapter 2, for example. So here you have Black Book material all the way down to this point, and then there's going to be a number 2 in your reading that tells you that now he's switched gears into a reflection on this. Okay. Now, I wanted to just give you an overview of the entire Liber Primus by just looking at the chapters and walking you through the storyline, if you will. These are the main headings or the chapters that we'll be looking at in the Liber Primus. Okay, the first chapter, well, the first page, this is what we're looking at, actually, the way of what is to come, this first page. And this page, he's going to be introducing the entire Red Book, and he's going to be introducing it as a prophetic book. He's going to be using quotations primarily from the prophet Isaiah in the Hebrew scriptures, and also a quotation from the Gospel of John that are referring to the Messiah, or the coming of the new God, because we're going to be seeing that the Red Book is really a description of how, using religious language, how God is born in the soul. Maybe how God is born in the soul anew. And so psychologically, what we're talking about is how the self is conceived and made conscious and becomes conscious within the individual psyche, okay? And how in that actualization of the self within the individual psyche, we participate, each one of us participates in that process in the evolution of the collective self, or the God image. And so this book is really about how the divine is born in us, and how in that process the God image is also transformed and evolving. I mean, this is an amazing book, and you can see why he would use these scriptural quotations to really give it that gravitas as he begins. The second, it's not a chapter, but the second portion is the distinction between the spirit of the depths and the spirit of the times. This is going to run throughout the Red Book, and so he gives it to us right up front. What is the distinction between the spirit of the depths and the spirit of the times? From here, he's going to bring us right into his searching experience for the soul, and the chapter 1 is called Refinding the Soul. For many years leading up to this, Jung had been lecturing and teaching about psychology, and he came to this realization that he had lost his soul, that he had lost touch with his soul. He knew the mythologies of other peoples, but he wasn't sure of his own mythology. And so he begins his search for his soul. So there's a section on refining the soul. There's a section on the soul and God. We'll take a look at that, where he's distinguishing in his inner material, in the dream material, in his active imagination material, the distinction between what he's calling his soul and what he's calling the divine or God. And this was a big question for him at this point. He's going to talk about then on the service of the soul. He's going to devote himself to this in a very religious way, if you will, with a religious attitude. And over a period of time, that's going to lead him into what he calls the desert, following the example of the ancient ones who went to the desert to find the religious experience. Then he has a chapter on experiences in the desert, where he's having, all of these are conversations with his soul. He's writing letters to his soul. And after 25 days of writing letters to his soul, this is what the time that transpires here, he's going to have this experience where he calls it a descent in terms of his first act of imagination, but it's also as much an upwelling of the unconscious as he engages with the unconscious and active imagination. So this would be the experience that we would we would know well from Memories, Dreams, Reflections, where he describes his kind of dropping down into the unconscious, and we'll take a look at that. That's his first, very very powerful experience of active imagination. Following that will be a chapter on splitting of the spirit, and what this is referring to his confusion after he has this active imagination, which is frightening, which is profound, which is really rattled him. He then has the conversation with his soul. What kind of a soul are you? Are you light or are you dark? Are you benevolent or malevolent? What are you? And he goes through this experience where he's really trying to sort this out. I mean, we would have the same experience, for example, with dreams that we might have, where we might have a disturbing dream, and we would wonder, well, is this in my psyche, or what is in my psyche? What is going on here? So he has this kind of splitting of the spirit, and then the next night he has a dream of the murder of the hero, which is going to parallel his active imagination. So his active imagination and his dream are going to, one flows right into the other, which is fascinating. Following the murder of the hero, the story of the murder of the hero, which we just looked at briefly. The next chapter is called The Conception of the God. Now, this is a profound shift, because once the old God image has been sacrificed, now there is that liminal space, or that in-between space, where the old God image is no longer ruling or governing. My old way of life is no longer in place, and there's space in the psyche for something new to be conceived. So you can think about all those experiences when you had to sacrifice an attitude, a way of life, a chapter of life. And in that sacrifice, that what follows is that moment when something new can be conceived in the psyche. So there's a conception of the God. And shortly thereafter, he has this mysterium encounter, which is his encounter with Salome and Elijah in active imagination. So in this descent into hell, he experiences and witnesses the active imagination. At this stage, he's going to start dialoguing with the figures that he encounters in active imagination. So we'll see a progression even in his active imagination. And finally, the last two chapters, instruction by Salome and Elijah, and a resolution in which he goes through an experience of being transformed, really deeply transformed by this contact with these depths. We'll have to just do with this enlargement. This is the painting here, which begins the Liber Primus. It's an extraordinary painting. Hopefully this disappears. You can see if you look closely, I'm not sure what kind of a screen you have, but if you can look closely in this painting, this is one of those historiated initials. But look what he does here at the beginning of his, how do I get this out of the way? There we go. Look what he does in this first initial. You see the whole thing is set up here. In this painting, it's an incredible painting. He's got the little town, the little village behind the background. There's even the church steeple. You can see the ship that's ready to sail. It's got a white flag and a red flag. And then you see the waters on which the ship will sail, and you see all of these kinds of things in the depths of the water. You see things like the growing coral. Coral would be very important in alchemy because it's stone, it's living stone in the depths. So he has coral, he has a crab or a lobster that we refer to, even the zodiac. We've got the fishes, and you can see that the counterpart, or the other side, would be in the heavens. You would have the signs of the zodiac, but these first four images, if you can make them out, correspond to the four elements. So there's water, and there's air, and there's earth, and there's fire. And they also refer to elements or figures in the zodiac. Here is the guiding star, a guiding star for the whole process. So there's something fateful about all of this. And you've got a vessel that contains the fire, the flames here. So containing that energy in the vessel is important, but out of that concentrated energy and the containment comes the spirit of the depths. Here is the crowned serpent that we'll see again and again, throughout the Red Book. It's incredible. I mean, in one final detail, you'll probably be seeing other things in here as well. There's so much in this tiny little painting, but look at this. You almost miss it. But at the very bottom, you see, the fire of the depths that's from below. So this is the way of what is to come, is to really that deep encounter that's going to make a connection with those unconscious depths. It's quite extraordinary. All right. So in the text, you're going to have some of these passages. Like I said, there's several quotations from Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, which are going to be referring to the Messiah. In that second paragraph, where it says, for example, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be on his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace." Probably that's a very familiar phrase to those of you who would know the Hebrew scripture. So this is the messianic prophecy. So it's talking again about the new God image, the birth of the God in the psyche, or the birth of the self in the psyche. And then the quotation from John, "And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory." So you can see that Jung understands this to be a sacred text and at the same time a prophetic text. All right. Now we flip the page over, the folio over. This is the back side. This is now still folio 1, the verso side. And this is the description of the spirit of the depths. This whole long calligraphy is describing the spirit of the depths and the spirit of the times. And I've just excerpted a little bit of that so that we can get an idea of it. So Jung writes here that I have learned that in addition to the spirit of this time, there is still another spirit at work, namely that which rules the depths of everything contemporary. The spirit of this time would like to hear of use and value. I also thought this way, and my humanity still thinks this way. But I did not consider that the spirit of the depths from time immemorial and for all the future possesses a greater power than the spirit of this time, who changes with the generations. The spirit of the depths took my understanding and all my knowledge and placed them at the service of the inexplicable and the paradoxical. So we're going into the paradoxical already, this level of experience, of paradox. So we would know the spirit of the time. I mean, that's the collective attitudes, the movements that we see in the news, that we see around us all the time. And here Jung is connecting with the spirit of the depths. And I mean, in fact, this is what we are attempting to do when we follow our dreams, for example, or we do the inner work. Our attempt is to connect with the spirit of the depths and to have that as the counterbalance to our participation, even the necessary participation in the spirit of the time. I mean, we do live in our given age. Jung continued, I needed a visible sign that would show me that the spirit of the depths in me was at the same time the ruler of the depths of world affairs. It happened in October of the year 1913, as I was leaving alone for a journey, that during the day I was suddenly overcome in broad daylight by a vision. I saw a terrible flood that covered all the northern and low-lying lands between the North Sea and the Alps. I saw yellow waves swimming rubble, and the death of countless thousands. 2 weeks passed, and the vision returned. And once I also saw a sea of blood over the northern lands. Okay, we know that when Jung first had these visions, he was terribly afraid that he was going psychotic, right? You remember that from the reading. He had these visions, and he would not really understand that at that time he was experiencing in his psyche what was constellated in the collective unconscious at that time. And it was only with the outbreak of World War I in 1914 that he realized that he was processing within his own psyche, individualist psyche, he was processing that huge energy that was constellated at that time. So later he could make the statement that he makes at the top of this page. I needed a visible sign that would show me that the spirit of the depths in me was at the same time the ruler of the depths of the world affairs. Of course, he wouldn't come to this until later. At the time, he was terribly concerned after his work at the Bergholzli. He was terribly concerned that he was going into perhaps his own madness, his own experience of a psychosis. Now, this was noting that this is October of 1913 is when he has these visions. So with that experience of the visions, he's even more aware that he has lost touch with his soul. He talks about a loss of the soul. He knew the myths of many, many people and many nations and peoples, etc., but he wondered, what is my myth? And not only that, where's my soul? And so we have this chapter 1 is called Refinding the Soul. And the date for this in the Black Books is November the 12th, 1913. And I discovered that if you type in this date, what day of the week was November 12th, 1913, it will tell you that it was a Wednesday. And so it's fascinating to me to add that little detail to consider that during the day, Jung was seeing his clients, and he would see maybe 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 clients a day. And then in the evening, he would retire to his study and he would do this work and began seriously searching for his soul and writing letters to his soul. This was what was starting. So November 12, 1913, he begins these letters to his soul. Now, let me back up. You see these 2 initials, and they don't really correspond to the text. They correspond to a dream that Jung had a year earlier, a very, very famous dream that I wanted to share with you. So it also gives me an opportunity to show you these initials. I mean, incredible the love and the attention that Jung gave to his manuscript, to producing this. So this was a dream that he had in 1912. Probably most of you know this dream. This was a dream where he was visited by his soul. And there's a private conversation that I came across recorded by, I'd have to look it up, but in the private conversation, Jung is saying that this dream of this visitation of the soul, for him, ranked in importance to the very first dream that he remembered in his life, of the dream where he descends into the underground cavern and then throne room, where he sees the giant phallus that's sitting on the throne. And he understands over time that this is an experience of the underground God, or the spirit of nature. So that spirit of nature dream, and now this appearance of the anima, the soul in this dream, were 2 of the most valued dreams by Jung in his life. I mean, that's incredible. So here's the dream. I dreamed at that time, it was shortly after Christmas, 1912, that I was sitting with my children in a marvelous and richly furnished apartment, an open columned hall. We were sitting at a round table whose top was a marvelous dark green stone. Suddenly, a gull or a dove flew in and sprang lightly onto the table. I admonished the children to be quiet so that they would not scare away the beautiful white bird. Suddenly, this bird turned into a child of 8 years, a small blonde girl, and ran around playing with my children in the marvelous columned colonnades. Then the child suddenly turned into the gull or dove. She said the following to me: "Only in the first hour of the night can I become human, while the male dove is busy with the 12 dead." And with these words, the bird flew away and I awoke. So we have this visitation by the dove, who becomes the little girl. Jung understands that this is his soul, that he's visited by his soul. But there's the curious statement by the dove that only in the first hour of the night can I become human, while the male dove is busy with the 12 dead. And it's interesting to me that Jung would depict this dove in this moment in his letters to the soul. And he would also, in the second chapter, which is called The Soul and God, he would depict the dove and he would depict the serpent. And so there is the two figures. There's a two-ness here. Now we know that later in the Liber Primus, when Jung encounters his soul again in the figure of Salome, Salome is going to be accompanied by Elijah. Okay, so here we have this configuration of the anima or the soul with the wise old man or the prophet in this case. And it to me is a profound reflection that when we encounter the anima, that if we look behind the anima, so to speak, then there is the wise old man, or there is the self. And the same with the animus. If we look behind the animus, there would be the great mother, or there would be the wise old woman in that kind of a configuration. Now, they might not always be in a positive configuration. You know, for example, with the negative animus might have a negative mother in the background that has to be worked through and pondered over and wrestled with and suffered, sometimes for years and years and years. But there is a configuration we would see in the fairy tale, like, for example, the devil and his grandmother. That experience of there's the animus figure, and then there behind it is the great mother, or the anima. You can think of the anima that Jung gives many examples of the soul figure where there is a self figure behind it. So keep that in mind. I mean, that's a whole nother exploration and research and presentation, probably. But think about the anima and the animus with that in tandem with this other figure. So this is what the dove is telling him, that only in the first hour of the night I become human, while the male dove is busy with the 12 dead. And we will talk about that a bit more. So back to the actual text. So here's again, here is the beginning of chapter 1, and I've just pulled an excerpt from this first section. So Jung writes in this letter, "My soul, where are you? Do you hear me? I call you. Are you there? I have shaken the dust of all the lands from my feet, and I have come to you. I am with you. After long years of long wandering, I have come to you again." And then it's continued. "The spirit of the depths forced me to say this. I still labored misguidedly under the spirit of this time and thought differently about the human soul. I thought and spoke much of the soul. I knew many learned words for her. I had judged her and turned her into a scientific object. I had to become aware that I had lost my soul." Okay, so this is the starting point for Jung's descent or engagement. And we would all know this moment when we've had an experience of the loss of soul. We've been busy in life, or we've engaged life in such a way that we suddenly realize, maybe through a crisis, maybe through a scare like Jung had with his psychotic scare, of his visions, he realized that he had lost his soul, that he had lost a connection with his depths. And so he commits himself starting on November the 12th, Wednesday, November 12th, 1913, to these letters he's going to begin writing to his soul. Now, the very next night, he's going to be reflecting on the soul and God. No, this is 2 nights later, Wednesday to Friday. But you can picture now, it's Friday evening. Jung is finished with his clients. He has dinner. And now he's back up in his study, and he's pondering these dreams that he's had as he thinks about the soul. And he's trying to sort out, well, these experiences in my dreams, is this my soul? Is it God? What is it? So this is the first question that he wrestles with as he's really, really digging into the dream material. And I'll share with you some of his reflections. He writes in this next letter to his soul, I am weary, my soul. My wandering has lasted too long. My search for myself outside of myself. You announced yourself to me in advance in dreams. They burned in my heart and drove me to all the boldest acts of daring and forced me to rise above myself. You let me undertake journeys whose endless length would have scared me if the knowledge of them had not been secure in you. Who are you, my child? My dreams represented you as a child and as a maiden. I am ignorant of your mystery. How strange it sounds to call you a child, you who still hold the all without end in your hand. I mean, that's a description of God, right? I went on the way of the day, and you went invisibly with me, putting the pieces together meaningfully and letting me see the whole in each part. Okay, for many of us, this is how we are aware of our soul. We look back in our lives and we can see what has inspired us, what has carried us, what has kind of prompted us this way or that in our lives. As he says, allowed one to undertake journeys, to drove us to bold acts of daring, to rise above ourselves. When we look back in our lives, this is one way we can begin to get a feeling for what the soul is in us. In the man, Jung refers to it as the anima, in the woman, the animus. So what is it that is inspiring? What has guided you in all this way? So this is what he's doing. And he's also trying to sort out, is what I'm experiencing, is God for a man, is it feminine? And for a woman, is it masculine? Is this what God is? So there's a long section that he has to sort out and ponder over. Now, and so you can see it starts here, the God and the soul. And about right here is where he's doing these reflections. And if you follow this and you go to the next page, all of this and all of this will be his continued reflections on this distinction between the soul and God. All right, so he's working on this. And then on the Saturday, the 15th, okay, let me back up. This was Friday night. Now, Saturday night, he's back in his study. Oh. Doesn't it give you a feeling to even know the day of the week? I mean, it does for me to know that he's on Saturday night, he's finished his day, and he goes up to his study in the evening. He always did this in the evenings, these nights where he was working on this inner work. So on Saturday night, he is committing himself now to be in service of the soul. And I'm going to show you this painting that he does. In service of the soul. This introduces the chapter 3 here. I mean, I hope you can see this, but if you can see this, there's a little tower. He's built this little tower or painted this little tower on the edge of the lake. Now Jung didn't even buy the property at Bollingen for his tower until 1922. And he built the first little tower segment of it in 1923. And it wasn't until 27 that he had something that maybe looks like something like this. But here's the tower that's alongside the lake. And here even you might be able to see the banner that's flying above the tower, kind of just like a medieval turret almost. I mean, it's quite an amazing little painting that announces his service to the soul. And if I'm remembering correctly, when Jung was actually at his tower in Bollingen, he would put out some kind of a flag or something to say that he was there and not to be disturbed. And so this was, while he was there, he was in service to the soul. So this is an amazing little painting that precedes the actual construction of his tower. But this is Saturday night. He's devoting himself to the soul. So he writes, on the following night, I had to write down all the dreams that I could recollect, true to their wording. This meaning was an act. The meaning of this act was dark to me. Into what mist and darkness does your path lead? Must I also learn to do without meaning? If this is what you demand, then so be it. And notice this line. This hour belongs to you. You know how difficult it is for me to set aside the beggar's pride that I take in my own thought. I must learn to love you. Should I also set aside self-judgment? I am afraid. And then the soul spoke to me and said, this fear testifies against me. It is true, it testifies against you. It kills the holy trust between you and me. Notice how the soul just reorients everything in terms of that relationship with her. And also notice at the beginning that once he's had this experience of soul and God, now he's trying to gather up all the dreams that he could write down, he could recollect, and he's recording them. He's going to spend several nights writing his dreams down. And so you can see just the language of soul and God in relationship to his dreams, gives you a clear understanding or a clear idea of how he took the dream. First, that it was sacred, right? And that in the dream, he could actually find the images of both soul and God. I mean, that's incredible to me. He continues, how hard is fate? If you take a step toward your soul, you will at first miss the meaning. You will believe that you have sunk into meaninglessness, into eternal disorder, and you will be right. Nothing will deliver you from disorder and meaninglessness, since this is the other half of the world. Now, during 6 further nights, the spirit of the depths was silent in me. Now, remember, he's writing his dreams down, all of his dreams that he can remember. But on the 7th night, the spirit of the depths spoke to me. Look into your depths, pray to your depths, waken the dead. But I stood helpless and did not know what I could do. I looked into myself, and the only thing I found was the memory of earlier dreams, all of which I wrote down without knowing what good this would do. Okay, doesn't that sound familiar? We go back to our old dreams when we're doing that search. We're trying to make that connection with our soul. We're doing whatever we can, but the spirit of the depths actually gives him the first instruction on how to do active imagination. Active imagination is exactly this. Look into your depths, pray to your depths, give it your full attention, your total concentration and interest and energy, and waken the dead. Bring that unconscious to life. This is active imagination. All right, so at this point, now he is going to find himself, with his dreams. He's been recording his dreams, and the experience. You have all of this around you, but it feels like there's no meaning, or how can I find a meaning in any of this? And so at this stage, he goes into what he calls the desert. And if you look at this image, I don't know if you can see this image or not, but you see him in his pilgrim robe, I guess, and you can see the Latin. Well, it's the German word rather. The D here is for die Wüste, the desert. But here he is, and surrounding him is one long snake. It just goes all the way around. I don't know if you can see this on the painting. So being in the desert means that one is kind of contained in, surrounded by the spirit of the depths, and you have left the spirit of the times. It's a beautiful little image of what the desert psychologically represents. And here is what he writes. He says, "The sixth night, my soul leads me into the desert of my own self. Why is my self a desert? Have I lived too much outside of myself in men and events? Why did I avoid myself? Was I not dear to myself? But I have avoided the place of my soul. I was my thoughts. My soul, what am I to do here? But my soul spoke to me and said, wait. I heard the cruel word. Torment belongs to the desert. Nobody can spare themselves the waiting, and most will be unable to bear this torment, but will throw themselves with greed back at men, things, and thoughts, those whose slaves they will become from then on. Everything to come was already in images. To find their soul, the ancients went into the desert, and there they found the abundance of visions, the fruits of the desert, and wondrous flowers of the soul. I love that line. The fruits of the desert and the wondrous flowers of the soul. Now, this is now November the 28th, 1913. The next date is December 13th. So he's been in the desert for a good while, right? And he's going to be talking about experiences in the deserts. And take a look or take a listen now how the soul is beginning to respond to him as he's in the desert. He writes, after a hard struggle, I have come a piece of the way nearer to you. That's to the soul. I come with empty hands to you, my soul. What do you want to hear? But my soul spoke to me and said, if you come to a friend, do you come to take? I knew that this should not be so, but it seems to me that I am poor and empty. I would like to sit down near you and at least feel the breath of your animating presence. My soul answered and said, you speak to me as if you were a child complaining to its mother. I am not your mother. I do not want to complain, but let me say to you that mine is a long and dusty road. You can see Jung he keeps it up. He doesn't stop. You are like a shady tree in the wilderness. I would like to enjoy your shade. He's been doing this for 25 days now. But the soul answered, you are pleasure seeking. Where is your patience? Your time has not yet run its course. Have you forgotten why you went into the desert? And Jung responds, let me bring only one complaint before you. I suffer from scorn, my own scorn. And my soul answered, do you still not know that you are not writing a book to feed your vanity, but that you are speaking with me? I mean, what a statement. This was my 25th night in the desert, and this is how long it took my soul to awaken from a shadowy being to her own life until she could approach me as a free-standing being separate from me. And I received hard but salutary words from her. I needed that taking in hand since I could not overcome the scorn within me. So it's really important here what he describes, that the soul is no longer kind of the shadowy, kind of a vague presence in the background, but now is speaking to him as the freestanding being, that she has an autonomy, and he's now having conversations with her in his active imagination. This is a huge shift for him, the descent into hell in the future. He writes in his entry, in the following night, the air was filled with many voices, a loud voice calling, "I am falling." Others cried out confused and excited during this, "Where to? What do you want?" And he writes, "Should I entrust myself to this confusion?" I shuddered. "It is a dreadful deep. Do you want me to leave myself to chance, to the madness of my own darkness? Whither? Whither? You fall, and I want to fall with you, whoever you are." So he's accompanied here, right? In this moment of active imagination. Then he writes, "The spirit of the depths opened my eyes, and I caught a glimpse of the inner things, the world of my soul, the many formed and changing." So this is the description of when the unconscious comes alive for him in his active imagination. The many formed and changing, the living things. This is now the spirit of the depths is showing this to him. And then we have this description which you've read in Memories, his descent. He describes it. "I see a gray rock face along which I sink into great depths. I stand in black dirt up to my ankles in a dark cave. Shadows sweep over me. I am seized by fear, but I know I must go in. I crawl through a narrow crack in the rock and reach an inner cave whose bottom is covered with black water." Okay, remember, this is all active imagination. He's kind of moving into this landscape that he's seeing in his active imagination. And then suddenly, beyond this, I catch a glimpse of a luminous red stone which I must reach. I wade through the muddy water. The cave is full of the frightful noises of shrieking voices. I take the stone. It covers a dark opening in the rock. I hold the stone in my hand, peering around inquiringly. I place my ear to the opening, and I hear the flow of underground waters. Now you can see this little painting. I've enlarged it so you can see what he's done here. It's an incredible painting. I mean, look at what he has here. Now here's the stone, the red stone that he is approaching as he's in this water. I mean, he's got these figures that he has painted that are in the darkness. This is a kind of a reptilian figure you can see with these huge eyes and these feet that just kind of hovering above him. And then you can see this kind of a gadfly looking thing with this maybe a stinger. I don't know what this is. And then behind that, perhaps that's a bat with its eyes. So he's got this shadowy energies around him as he's trying to make this descent into the unconscious. So I mean, on a very basic level, this would be the energies that one would feel, the feelings one would have even as one is making that descent of approaching the unconscious. And remember, Jung didn't have a Jung before him to give him the instructions on how to do this. He is just doing this as a self-experiment. And so this is quite a courageous thing that he's doing. He lifts the stone, and as he listens and looks below, he sees another vision or another scene. This stone, or removing the stone, is a bit like he called it like the oracle. He could consult the oracle at this point, at this place. So this could become like a rite of entry for him to the unconscious, to come to this oracle place, to lift the stone and to engage the unconscious. It's quite a beautiful rite of entry that he has experienced already in this first situation or first experience. It's remarkable. And then when he looks down below, this is what he sees. I see the bloody head of a man on the dark stream. Someone wounded, someone slain floats there. I take in this image for a long time, shuddering. I see a large black scarab floating past on the dark stream. In the deepest reach of the stream shines a red sun. 1,000 serpents crowd around, veiling the sun. Deep night falls. A red stream of blood, thick red blood, springs up for a long time, then ebbing, and I am seized by fear. So this is the enlarged picture of what he sees. This is his painting. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. We see the slain figure, we see the scarab, we see the red sun that's in the unconscious. I mean, we look at this and you can't help but think of the image of, the ovum and the sperm, right? That being penetrated by the snakes and the serpents. I mean, it's quite an amazing image here. We'll take a look at it. So this is what he sees in the depths. He writes, because I was caught up in the spirit of the time, precisely what happened to me on this night had to happen to me, namely that the spirit of the depths erupted with force and swept away the spirit of this time with a powerful wave. So it's not just Jung just dropping down like he writes in Memories. The spirit of the depths is also erupting with force. So it is this meeting that he has with the unconscious at this point. And he continues writing, but the spirit of the depths had gained this power because I had spoken to my soul during 25 nights in the desert, and I had given her all my love and submission. And so this is what led up to this huge experience of his active imagination. All right. I'm aware that I've got lots of material. I don't want to rush this, but I'm hoping that hoping it's not rushed for you to be looking at this material in this way. Now, after this experience, like I mentioned before, Jung is going to be in a terrible conflict because he's now questioning, well, what am I going to discover in my soul or in the unconscious? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it benevolent or malevolent? And there's this huge splitting of the spirit discussion and debate that he has with the soul. On the fourth night I cried, to journey to hell means to become hell oneself. Okay, now this is his concern, right? If I'm looking at a murderous scene, does that mean that I'm murderous? So he's trying to sort this out. It's all frightfully muddled and interwoven. But my soul spoke to me saying, my path is light. So this is paradox. Right? This is paradoxical statement. And yet I indignantly answered, do you call light what we men call worst darkness? Do you call day night? So you can see this experience that Jung is having, or hear the experience in the struggle inside. What do I make of the unconscious? Can you imagine what that would be like to wrestle with this without having a good guide in the background? He continues, everything that becomes too old becomes evil. Same is true of your highest. Learn from the suffering of the crucified God that one can also betray and crucify a God, namely the God of the old year. Okay, so already we're kind of anticipating that killing of Siegfried. If a God ceases being the way of life, he must fall secretly. Then God becomes thick if he oversteps the height of the zenith. And that is why the spirit of the depths took me when the spirit of this time had led me to the summit. All right. And now we're going to come, again, I hope I'm not kind of taking us, I can just feel the energy myself of how this is moving. He's had this active imagination experience. He's had this huge struggle with his soul of, what am I doing? Is this positive, negative, good, evil? Am I going to go crazy? He doesn't really know for sure, but he also knows that there was a shining sun. That red sun was also in the depths. And there was the scarab that was an image of that new birth or that rebirth. So he has images there that give him hope. And now we're going to go into the dream. It's not an active imagination. He's going to dream this. Which is interesting to me because sometimes we make this distinction between active imagination and our dream life. And in this case, one flows kind of right into the other, which means that we certainly can take dream images and use them in our active imagination. And our dreams can pick up on our active imagination and include that imagery. This flow can be back and forth. So on Thursday, December the 18th, he wakes up that night with the dream of the murder of the hero. He writes, on the following night, however, I had a vision. Well, when you read in the Black Book, it says, I awoke from a frightful dream. Okay, so he's dreaming this murder of the hero. He continues, I was with a youth in the mountains. It was before daybreak. And then Siegfried's horn resounded over the mountains with a jubilant sound. And then we saw him coming high across the mountains on a chariot of the bones of the dead. He drove boldly and magnificently over the steep rocks and arrived at a narrow path where we were hiding. As he came around the turn of us, ahead of us, we fired at the same time and he fell slain. And thereupon I turned to flee, and a terrible rain swept down. But after this I went through a torment unto death, and I felt certain that I must kill myself if I could not solve the riddle of the murder of the hero. And then the spirit of the depths came to me and spoke these words. The highest truth is one and the same with the absurd. This statement saved me. Okay, so you can see kind of the movement in this process. So he kills the hero, but then he feels certain that he must kill himself if he cannot solve the riddle. So you can see how that murderous aspect is constellated in him. And he might even turn it on himself if he doesn't get to the meaning. It's that serious, it's that urgent. So he is in that energy when he's having this dream or following this dream. And then he writes, well, we should look at the painting. Take a look at this. This is incredible. Beauty of technology to be able to enlarge it like this. This is the small, tiny painting. But you can see Jung and his companion, Siegfried has come around the corner and now they have shot him and they have murdered Siegfried. And presumably he falls down in the chasm below. And you can see in the dawn is arising. I mean, just imagine that scenario. The hero is killed and there's a new sun, a new dawn, a new day arising here. Jung has painted himself in red. So he has that murderous red that he's wearing. I mean, he's in it. He's participating in that along with his companion, shooting Siegfried on this mountain slope. I mean, and just as a painting. I mean, this is tiny painting. I've enlarged it, I don't know how many times, but look at the painting. It's incredible that Jung is giving such attention to this scene. This is his active imagination as well. To do the painting and to create this scene is a furthering of his active imagination in his dream. Absolutely amazing. And he writes, oh, that Siegfried, blonde and blue-eyed, the German hero, had to fall by my hand, the most loyal and courageous. He had everything in himself that I treasured as the greater and more beautiful. He was my power, my boldness, my pride. And then listen to this reflection. Think of the blonde savage of the German forests who had to betray the hammer-brandishing thunder to the pale Near Eastern god who was nailed to the wood. So he's reminding us about the as he says, the original inhabitants of the German forest who were worshiping Thor, the thunder god. And then when Christianity came in, they had to sacrifice or betray that level of religious life to accept the pale Near Eastern god who was nailed to the wood. So he continues, they betrayed their beautiful wild gods, their holy trees, and their awe of the German forest. And that is why I almost preferred to kill myself in order to spare him. But I wanted to go on living with the new God, a hero beyond Christ. That little last segment is in the Black Book, a hero beyond Christ. Okay, so this is sacrificing the old God image, or sacrificing kind of the old way of life, sacrificing what was valuable and important. Like he says, he sacrificed everything in himself that he treasured as the greater and more beautiful. He was his power, his boldness, his pride, all this aspect. In other places, Jung will describe it psychologically as describing how he had to move beyond his dominant function of thinking. But here's the mythological explanation and the deeper archetypal explanation of what he's doing in this moment. Absolutely incredible. And he continues, if the God grows old, he becomes shadow, nonsense, and he goes down. The greatest truth becomes the greatest lie. Think about that. The greatest truth becomes the greatest lie. The brightest day becomes the darkest night. So when the God image loses its numinosity, loses its meaning for the new age, then it becomes, in a sense, the greatest lie, or it becomes the darkest night. I mean, that's incredible to ponder. As day requires night and night requires day, so meaning requires absurdity, and absurdity requires meaning. All right, so this is the murder of the hero. Now, as I said earlier, now this was what day? This was Thursday night, December the 18th. So he will have sat with that experience for a couple of days. And then on Saturday night, he will have this profound awareness that with the murder of the old God, that this creates the space for the conception of the new God image within the psyche. And in the Red Book, this chapter starts here. This long section here is spoken to him by the spirit of the depths. This is all the spirit of the depths talking to him about what this means, that he has murdered Siegfried. So you can think about, again, when you have sacrificed a way of life, you've sacrificed a chapter of your life that you were attached to but needed to change. It might be a relationship, a group, a religious community, all sorts of things that we can sacrifice. When we make those sacrifices, there is the possibility, not the guarantee, but the possibility that something new can be conceived in the psyche. And in this case, he had sacrificed Siegfried, or the old God image. And now there is that space for the conception of the God. He writes, when the hero was slain and the meaning recognized in the absurdity, when all tension came rushing down from gravid clouds, when everything had become cowardly and looked to its own rescue. Now he's describing all this turmoil, right? I became aware of the birth of the God. He changes that to conception. He writes originally birth, but the God isn't born yet. It's only conceived at this point. And I must say that the God could not come into being before the hero had been slain. The hero, as we understand him, has become an enemy of the God, since the hero is perfection. The hero must fall for the sake of our redemption, since he is the model and he demands imitation. If we are in ourselves, then the space around us is free, but filled by the God. And that's incredible. All right. I hope it's okay to keep going, because this was Saturday night, where he has this profound awareness that with this sacrifice and the death of Siegfried, which he was so disturbed by, has created some space in the psyche for the conception of the new God. And so on the 21st of December, Sunday night, the 21st, 1913, he's going to have what he calls the mysterium encounter. This is when he's going to now, in his active imagination, first meet Salome and Elijah. Okay, so in his first active imagination, the big one that he had gone down, he witnessed everything, but it wasn't a conversation. Now he will have an encounter, a huge development here. So on the night when I considered the essence of the God, what we've just been talking about, I became aware of an image. Now, and this is one way to even begin active imagination, to ponder the essence of God, to leave yourself wide open to what is the energy of the spirit of the depths, so to speak. How will the spirit of the depths speak? So on the night when I considered the essence of the God, I became aware of an image. I lay in a dark depth. An old man stood before me. He looked like one of the old prophets. A black serpent lay at his feet. Some distance away, I saw a house with columns. A beautiful maiden steps out of the door. She walks uncertainly, and I see that she is blind. Isn't it interesting how he describes it almost, what is the tense even changes? An old man stood before me. He looked like one, and now a beautiful maiden steps out of the door and she walks uncertainly, and I see that she is blind. You can even feel the active imagination coming alive, can't you? The old man waves to me, and I follow him to the house at the foot of the sheer wall of rock. The serpent creeps behind us. Darkness reigns inside the house. We are in a high hall with glittering walls. A bright stone the color of water lies in the background. And as I look into its reflection, the images of Eve, the tree, and the serpent appear to me. So it's a bit like looking into the water, into the depths of the water, right? And seeing now the images that appear. So you can even kind of get an instruction almost on doing active imagination of how one can just go step by step in this way. And here is the painting of Jung encountering the beautiful Salome and Elijah. And again, he with this painting, he adds these elaborations and the serpent energies. You can hardly see it in this painting, but there is the snake is right here. The black serpent is down below here. You might be able to see it. So these are the figures. Remember, there's the anima, and then with the anima, there's the wise old man. It's the dove in the first hour, so to speak, and the male dove who is visiting the 12 dead. It's an amazing, amazing image. Now he writes at this point, he says that this play that I witnessed is my play, not your play. It is my secret, not yours. You cannot imitate me. My secret remains virginal, and my mysteries are inviolable. They belong to me and cannot belong to you. You have your own. He who enters into his own must grope through what lies at hand. He must sense his way from stone to stone. He must embrace the worthless and the worthy with the same love. But let your hope, which is your highest good and highest ability, lead the way and serve you as a guide in the world of darkness, since it is like substance with the forms of that world. So he's giving us this kind of word of caution, so to speak, that this is my process. You can't exactly imitate it and go find your own Salome and Elijah. You've got to find your own way as you explore your own inner life and your own depths. You've got to do it in your own way with your dreams and your active imagination.